So I've talked about like some of the best duty assignments, some of the best places to be stationed at, and some of that was my opinion. Some of that was from talking to other individuals to get their opinions as well, to kind of collaborate that together. But what about some actual data? Actual data to say, what are the top places that new soldiers are requesting? Because right now they have a way that soldiers that are joining the Army right now can possibly pick their first duty station. And there's some data. There's some data that says that these locations are the places that soldiers are requesting the most. So what are the top 5? Well, let's see, shall we? Now, as I said, these aren't my opinions. I'm not saying that this is the best one based on my opinion for this reason. No, this is some data that the Army has kind of like released, or the military has released, to say that, hey, these are locations that are the top places that soldiers are trying to go to. So when soldiers go and they enlist, there are options that they have where they can possibly pick their first duty station. And so I've got a top 5, right? There's like a whole top 10, but we're just going to talk about the top 5 and maybe even give a little bit insight as to why maybe people are picking these locations. Because especially like number 1 kind of surprised me, and probably for some of you, number 1's going to surprise you as well. But work our way from number 5 and work our way up to that one. So let's talk about these. One of the other key things you got to understand too is you can't judge a duty station based on the leadership that's there, because that leadership may only be there for like 2 years. So one soldier might say that this place is the worst because the leadership was garbage. They didn't look after soldiers. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. But then the next person, they get stationed there, and it's maybe a year later, 2 years later, and that leadership that other soldier was complaining about isn't there anymore. And maybe it's gotten better, maybe it's gotten worse, maybe it stayed just as crappy as it was. But you can't really judge a duty station based on the leadership. You can't say that X duty station is the worst. Don't get stationed there, the leadership sucks. That leadership is probably only going to be there for about 2 years before they're going to move on to something else, and you're going to get different leadership that hopefully is better, but there's no guarantee of that. So you can't judge it based on that. But nonetheless, regardless of that, personal opinion, maybe some of you feel the same way, what are soldiers actually requesting? So let's start off number 5, all right? That's Joint Base Lewis McChord, otherwise known as JBLM in Washington. It's got some convenient location, right? It's a nice area and everything like that. It's not too far from like Seattle or from Tacoma, so maybe people want to be in that area, maybe want to have easy access to that, but maybe there's other amenities that they're kind of interested in when it comes to JBLM. It is a place that, people will say that, is a great place to go like hiking and skiing and camping, a lot of outdoor recreation type of stuff in Washington. So, there can just be a lot of people that are like, really interested in that outdoor kind of lifestyle. Maybe they're even from Washington, but, there's a lot of opportunities probably in that area to do things. Because it's a joint base, they also have like Air Force in the area. I could see the possibility of maybe they have family members that are in their Air Force, maybe like a brother, a sister, a whatever type of thing, and they'd like to be, somewhere near them, because that person chose to go into the Air Force, but they're choosing to go to the Army, and they can still be co-located together even though they're in 2 separate branches of the military. So maybe people are choosing that for that kind of reason. Number 4, though, on the list is Fort Bliss, and that one's kind of a weird one, because I've heard some people said they hated Fort Bliss because of the area, but I've also heard some people say they loved the Fort Bliss area. So maybe some possibilities as to why Fort Bliss could be on this list. Well, let's see. Probably a big factor you got to consider is that the military has said that a large number of individuals that do join the Army are from certain areas, and Texas is one of those states that is one of the largest like recruiting locations that soldiers join from. So they're already from Texas. So Fort Bliss being in Texas is a good option for those individuals that want to still stay in Texas because they're from Texas. So that could be a possibility as well. You got the warm climate, right? You got the nice warm area. You don't have to worry about snow. I know that would be a major factor for me. I hate the snow. I don't know why I live in Colorado, but nonetheless, warm climate is nice. So some people would probably want to live in that warm climate. So choosing Texas can be a good possibility. So getting Fort Bliss to stay in Texas to get that warm climate, great opportunity. It is near Mexico. I've heard some pretty wishy-washy things about how good Juarez, Mexico is. It's a pretty bad area from what I've heard from a lot of people. Maybe there's good parts of Juarez. I have no idea. I've never been there, but from people I've talked to in that area that have been stationed in that area, Juarez isn't necessarily the greatest place to go, but nonetheless, you want to go to Mexico. Maybe you drive through Juarez and past it and go somewhere else, but maybe that's a big thing. Maybe someone wants to go and check out Mexico because they've never been to Mexico, so they're like, yeah, let's get stationed at Fort Bliss and we'll go check out Mexico. That is a problem I've heard from some individuals, though. Some people have told me that there's a lot of like car theft coming out of Juarez. So in that area, you get a lot of cars stolen, but I don't know what the statistics are on that as far as how often cars are actually getting stolen out of the area. But nonetheless, it's number 4 on this list, so maybe it's not that bad. I don't know. Apparently, it's a pretty popular place that people want to be. It does have the largest PX in the United States Army. I don't know if that's a factor that people are considering, but maybe a little fun fact for you, that place is huge. It's got a Denny's, it's got a Buffalo Wild Wings, it's got a Foot Locker, it's like a whole strip mall, plus it's crazy. It's the largest PX that the Army has. So if you do happen to get stationed there, you request that place, check out the PX. It's the biggest PX in the Army. Moving on to the third one, though, the third most requested duty station to get sent to by new soldiers, Fort Carson, Colorado. And maybe I'm a little bit biased. I like Fort Carson. I live in this area. But hey, it's a pretty cool area. So why does it end up number 3 on the list? Why does it end up on this list in the first place? I can think of a lot of reasons, right? There is a ton of things to do in this area, right? There's a lot of outdoor activities, indoor activities. If you're into hiking, skiing, you want to go camping, you want to go hunting, fishing, all that stuff is in the area. If you're not a very outdoorsy person, there's also a ton of indoor stuff because Denver isn't very far away. So if you want to go see a sporting event, you probably have your favorite team that's going to play one of the Colorado teams or something like that, whether it's hockey, basketball, baseball, football, whatever, you probably can go see it, plus a lot of concerts. So there's just a lot to do, and I think that's why it's like one of my top locations. But on this list is number 3 as far as what soldiers are requesting, but there's just a lot to do in the area. You could have the same factor like you had with JBLM, where it is co-located with Air Force and Space Force. You have the Space Force is here, you have an Air Force base, you also have the Air Force Academy, which is like the Air Force's version of West Point, basically. So if you have family members that are in this area because they're in the Space Force, they're in the Air Force, then that can be good. That's one of the reasons why I picked to actually be stationed at Fort Carson when I initially picked to get stationed there, was because I'd heard a lot of people talking like good things about it, but also my niece was in the Air Force in Colorado, so it was nice to be able to be near family and be able to hang out with family on my off time. That's usually the biggest factor with Fort Carson is the area. A lot of people talk pretty highly about the area and stuff like that. There's just a lot to do with its indoor, outdoor type of stuff. It's a great area. I have talked about it before in a lot of my videos. Maybe that's a factor. Maybe some people watch my videos and they're like, I want to go to Fort Carson because Christopher Chaos says Fort Carson is awesome. And I've actually talked to a few people that said that was the reason why they picked Fort Carson. I'm sure it's probably like a pretty small percentage. I won't say that the reason why it got ranked this high, is because of me, and otherwise it would have been like last place. No, I'm not saying that, but there's probably a tiny, small little percentage that's maybe because I've talked about it a lot and people have watched my videos and been like, yeah, sure, Fort Carson, let's put that on my list. When I did my video a long time ago, it was more of like my opinion, other people's opinion. Fort Carson was number 2, but in this case, according to the data, it's the 3rd most requested location for new soldiers, at least. But now we got to get to number 2, and number 2 is Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which also is in Tennessee because the base is right on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee, but I think the headquarters is on the Kentucky side. But nonetheless, you go past one stoplight on Fort Campbell and you're either in Kentucky or in Tennessee, and it's very easy to end up on one side or the other. I think the majority of Fort Campbell, though, is on the Tennessee side. There are things near like Fort Campbell, right? They got, Nashville's not too far and several other major cities. And I've been there briefly last year. I went there for some training to do. And it seemed like a good area, but I was only there for like a week. So, it's not a good way to kind of judge it type of thing, but it seemed like a good area. And I've known people that have been stationed there, and I know some people that live in that area too. And they seem to like it. They seem to like the area and say it's a pretty good, decent place. One of the major factors I think might contribute to this one being even so high on the list, or even on the list in the first place, is a very iconic unit is there, the 101st Airborne Division. And I think there's a lot of people out there that when they think about joining the Army, they want to be a part of the Screaming Eagles, right? They want to be in the 101st Airborne Division, even though it's not an airborne division anymore. They're actually Air Assault, but nonetheless, it's a very iconic unit. And so I think people want to be a part of that, want to be able to say that they were in the 101st, want to be able to have that patch on their uniform. Maybe they had ancestors, maybe grandparents, whatever, they were in the 101st, back in the day. And it's like a big accomplishment for them to want to be in the 101st. You also have SOAR and everything, which is like the high speed, helicopter individuals too, which is pretty elite and everything like that. But I think the 101st plays a major factor in there. I mean, there's an air assault school, but there's also an air assault school at other locations. I mean, Fort Bliss has one, and other locations have an air assault school, but probably the Fort Campbell one is probably the more well-known air assault school because of the 101st. So I think that probably plays a major factor in there. Is that people, they think about, they think of the Army, they think of that Screaming Eagles, very iconic, they want to be in the 101st, so they want to go to Fort Campbell. There's possibly other reasons. It's just one of the reasons I can think of in my head. A lot of people, really associate the 101st with a very iconic kind of unit with the United States Army, so they want to be a part of that. So what is that number one? What is the most requested duty station that new soldiers want to get assigned to? Well, Fort Cavazos, Texas, previously known as Fort Hood, Texas. And I'm pretty surprised. Maybe you're pretty surprised. Maybe some people are not surprised, because I've talked to people that love that area, love Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, but loved it. I've also talked to a lot of people that absolutely hated it. So nonetheless, I'm surprised that it's number one. So why is that? I think part of it might go back to, as I was talking about before, Texas has one of the largest, locations that people are joining from. People are from Texas that are joining the Army, and that's one of the top locations that people are joining the Army from. So they just want to stay in Texas. And with Fort Cavazos being kind of centrally located, it probably makes it easy to be able to easily, go see family, whether north, south, east, west in Texas or whatever. Cool. You can keep that Texas kind of pride, you can stay in that kind of climate and everything else like that. So I could see it possibly for that, but there's some cool stuff in that area too. I've been to that area for like training and work and stuff like that, but like Austin is nearby. You have San Antonio's not very far. So there's a lot of cool stuff to do in those cities and everything, and probably other surrounding cities. The immediate area of Killeen, Texas, not the greatest, and maybe some people like it, maybe some people hate it. It doesn't seem like it's the greatest town, I think the opposite side was at Copper's Cove. I've heard it's a little bit better, but nonetheless, you get a little bit outside of that immediate area, and it's got some cool stuff to do. I'm not sure if it's the largest. I don't think it's the largest. I think Fort Cavazos has a very large built-up area, so it might be like in the runner for that kind of a thing, because I think Fort Bliss has actually the largest total square, footage size or acre size or whatever kind of a thing, because they have such a large training area. But nonetheless, it's a large area. Maybe people want to be on a large installation because there's a lot of amenities there. There's a lot of stuff there. I don't know. I was pretty surprised to see Fort Cavazos as the number one most requested duty station. But I think it's probably just goes back to people want to be in Texas maybe. There's a lot of people even moving from other states to move to Texas. So they're like, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to move to Texas. I've always wanted to move to Texas. So maybe they look at it in that kind of way. But it's just surprising because of such controversy and everything that had gone on with, Fort Hood back in the last several years type of thing, to where, it's surprising that people want to be there. I guess I can see it. Like I said, I've been there several times. There's some cool stuff about it, so I can understand that. I can understand it being cool. I've heard people say a lot of bad stuff about First Cav, but as I've said before, you can't really judge a duty station based on the leadership that's there, because that leadership is going to change, and it's going to be there for a short amount of time and then go somewhere else, and then new leadership's going to come in that's hopefully better, but no guarantee that's going to happen. So were you surprised that Fort Cavazos was number one on the list? What did you think number one was going to be? I know some of you out there are probably thinking, like, what about Europe? What about Italy? That kind of stuff. It is on the list. It was actually number 6, so it just fell off of that. And I think that's mainly because, these are new soldiers that are going to the Army, so they haven't yet heard of all the cool stuff about Germany and all that stuff just yet from other soldiers. I don't know, type of thing. But nonetheless, it was number 6, Europe was. So it was still pretty close, but not as high as these other ones I mentioned. But like I said, what do you think number one was going to be? Also, for those of you that want to join, or maybe you're already in, what's your number one location? Where is the number one place that you want to be stationed at? And I know some of you may say Fort Couch, Fort Home, but all seriousness, in the Army, where would you want to be stationed at? Maybe leave me some comments down in the comment section down below. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want to watch more of it, well, you just gotta make sure you're subscribed. That's all you gotta do. It's very easy, it's free. All the cool kids are doing it. Hit that damn subscribe button, hit that thumbs up. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya. So since we're on the topic of first duty stations, I got a video right here that talks about what to expect from your first duty station. So make sure you go check that out.